have a best friend. We've been through a lot together, so when I graduated from college and started to make a name for myself in my own business, I decided, hey, I'm going to hire my best friend because he's been there for me. What I did not expect was the deep betrayal I was about to be stabbed with in the back when I found out my best friend's dirty little secret. Oh yeah, it involves my wife.
This is my heads up to anyone who's trying to make it in life. The rich also cry. It's coming from someone who has achieved success in his career but has failed, or is failing to hold his marriage together. I run a thriving fintech company, and my best friend Tim is my manager. Tim and I, well, we go way back. The same high school, same college, yeah. We lived together in college. It was during our time together that I knew Tim to be somewhat organized. The direct opposite of me. If you ever visited me in college and found my room neat, it was from the handiwork of Tim. He was always cleaning up after my messes. Tim had his downsides though, don't get me wrong. He was a chronic womanizer. I'd even joked over the time that having ladies troop to the house looking for him made him keep it neat. Tim never sees it as a downside though, because it doesn't affect his decisions and dealings with women. He's not what you would call a simp. He did not mix business with pleasure ever. When it came to women, he believed he could get the best value with little input, and I, on the other hand, was too focused on my system to get a dating life. The whole, show me your friend and I'll tell you who you are thing, it never worked as Tim failed at converting me. I graduated from college with the good programming skills in JavaScript writing, and I decided to start up a community where I mentored aspiring programmers. My community's growth was slow, but when it became consistent, I began encountering difficulties managing it. After giving it some thought, I asked Tim to resign from his salespersonal job and come manage my community. I wasn't offering him much, but my vision was enough to convince him. People would always follow someone who has a vision and knows where he was going. Within months after Tim coming into the picture, I was able to raise enough money from the subscription of the community members, and I decided to open a fintech company. Getting those to work with and for me was not difficult. Most of my mentees were willing to work with me for the experience alone, and managing them was not going to be difficult as I had Tim by my side. To compensate Tim for the sacrifices he had made so far, I offered him a 20% share of the fintech company. As expected, I had all kinds of ladies at my beck and call, but I wasn't interested. Tim made good use of the situation, though. He soon advised me to just pay a little bit of attention to my love life so it doesn't look like there's something wrong with me that I'm trying to hide from people. I think I tried with 2 ladies, but it didn't work out. This was not my fault anyways. I tried befriending these ladies before establishing a relationship with them. For somebody in my position who owned a company that's worth $500,000 at the time, it was unwise to just jump into a relationship without knowing much about the individual, right? This was the purpose of the quote, "let's be friends for now." Well, while trying things out with the first lady I ever dated, I made sure we always met at my place, as I did not want to meet with her somewhere public. This was so that the paparazzi, or whatever you want to call them, would not paint a picture of her as my lover before time. Somewhere along the line, she cajoled me into hanging out at a spot close to her home. And before the next day, pictures of both of us laughing together littered the internet with captions of her being my lover. I was not happy about it, as she was just my friend. Besides, I did not want to get engaged in one form of a scandal or the other. She came over to my house the next day smiling as though the sun had risen on her face. I told her what had happened, and she was happy people were now thinking she was my love interest. I said nothing, but I began keeping her at a distance till she was not even close to the friend zone anymore. The other lady I tried rolling with was overly demanding and dependent from the start to finish. She expected, because we were on a talking term, that I was to deal with every problem that she had. And she always had problems that needed what? That's right, monetary solutions. This was not the kind of women I would want to marry. It was a major red flag. She would basically carry the whole of her generation's problems, both living and dead, to heap on my head. I felt choked up, and that's because I was. I finally had to stop taking her phone calls and warned her to quit coming to my house as I need space. It was at that point I decided that if I was ever going to date or get married to a lady, then there were requirements that she just had to meet. She must be a career-driven lady who was smart and, well, gorgeous. Secondly, she must be independent. She has to have her own life already. This aspect was very important to me, as I did not subscribe to the whole "my money is our money" trash that lazy women like to go with. Tim soon meets Maeve, the love of his life. That's basically what he called every lady before he lost interest in them, though. She was not in the tech space, though, but she did have a life. She was an accountant. Maeve was beautiful, at least to my standards. I had my doubts as to if she would be able to keep my friend Tim glued to her, though. I was happy for Tim all the same. You could call their wedding a tech convention, and you would be right. Most of the people present were in the tech world. It was there that I met my would-be future wife, Julia. I liked Julia at first glance, and I decided to make her undergo my test, just to see if we were compatible. She looked like she met my standards at face level, and she was a front-end engineer, and I loved the fact that she was into my world. We started as friends, and I made sure we only met at my luxuriously rented apartments, as I did not want a repetition of the last experience where the public would find me hanging out with her and then proceed to make something that was not there yet. I informed her beforehand, though, that I was not comfortable meeting with her outside the confines of my home, and she understood more than I even expected her to. She noted that it was a very wise thing for me to do, just for my stature. The fact that she understood the situation of things pleased me. Within 3 months of knowing her, I decided I was going to officially ask her to be my woman. I called her up, asked that we meet at my apartment. She was surprised and noted my timing was impeccable. She claimed that she was about to reach out to me for the same reason, and she had something she needed to discuss with me. So we agreed to meet later that evening at my place. Julia came over, and she was looking nice as always, and I decided I would wait till after our discussion before I would go ask her to date me. It turned out, when she began speaking, that she had a request. She wanted to create an app for students, and she needed a certain amount of funds to cover the marketing cost and all. It was the first time she would be making a request, and though I could easily part with the amount of money she was asking for, I did not want to set the path for future dependency on my money. So I asked when she intended to pay it back, and I could see her eyeballs almost shoot out of its socket. When Julia asked for the money, she did not state she wanted to borrow it. From the way she asked, she needed to just give her the money and forget I ever did. That was the favor she was asking for. She did not expect that the big boy like me would ask to know when she was going to get the money back to me. She stuttered a bit as she said I would get it in 3 months' time. So I asked that she came to the office the next day and I'll have the money transferred to her account. She thanked me and asked what it was I wanted to discuss with her. So I just lied and said I needed her advice on a certain managerial decision. I thought it's best to not ask her out till she's done paying me the money, which I was going to let her borrow. Julia came over to my office the next day, and I brought out a legal document that I'd gotten my lawyer to draft up to sign for her. I know, you might think it's a bit awkward or so, but I did it as there's even a tendency that familiarity might get in the way, and she could decide against paying my money back. Besides, it's my money which I had worked hard for, and it would be stupid of me to not separate business from pleasure. Even Tim would not do that, so rather than wooing Julia by asking her to not pay me the money back, I made it pretty darn clear that I was going to take legal charges if my money was not paid on time. My game plan worked out just as expected, and Julia repaid the money a month before the due date. I then proceeded to ask her to be my woman. She said yes, with a bit of hesitation though. I was surprised in a way because I'd actually expected her to run away from a guy who was willing to legally drag her around just for an amount that he could easily let go. I felt she was still carried away that I was a public figure, and things would change when we began dating officially, so I sat with her to draft up a couple of agreements. My terms were straight to the point. I told her we would always split the bills 50-50 each time we went out to an outing at a very private place. She was not to announce to anyone yet about our relationship, and neither was she to make social media posts about it. Julia did not object, though. She was okay with it, and I felt I had an independent woman at my hands. I did not know that she was patiently setting me up for a disaster. Julia never called to ask for anything while we were dating. She was actually the one doing things for me with her own money. She gifted me $5,000 Rolex watch, the most expensive gift I've ever gotten at the time. I mean, yeah, it was a used watch, but it was stunning. Her student's app was not very successful, but she did not let that affect the way she related with me. Though I was in a better position, she was the more liberal one. I planned on spoiling her with the things the moment we got married, though. I was only acting stingy to see her true motives for dating me. 2 months after we began dating, I proposed to her, and she agreed to be my wife. I was absolutely intoxicated with the wine called Julia. Just like everyone else, Tim was glad I had finally been getting married, and he advised me to sign a prenup if I did not trust Julia enough. He noted, though, that marriage was all about entrusting your life to somebody worthy, and Tim's explanation of marriage touched me in some way. He said that he did not have to sign any prenup with his wife as he trusts her with his life. His gesture equally made her not doubt his love, and it makes her easily submit to him. After listening to Tim, I decided Julia was worthy of my all. I felt Julia had proven herself to me, and there's no need to sign whatever form of document, and I was just eager for us to get married so I could reciprocate the liberal gestures that she had shown to me over time. Our wedding day finally came, and I gifted Julia a car. She was elated. This was the first thing I was going to give to her, and it was not going to be the last. I'd made arrangements that we would spend a 3-week honeymoon in the Maldives, which Tim looked over the company in my absence for. Right from the first day of our marriage, I had only sought ways to make my wife happy. The moment we returned from our brief vacation, I saw Tim's suggestions on ways to please women since he was a novice in the area, you know. Tim said I was to ensure I never shut her out of my life. He suggested I brought her into the company since she would be an asset to us in the front-end engineering department. So, I welcomed the idea. Within days, my wife became a member of my company, and she was the second highest paid personnel. Obviously, though, Tim was the first. Julia and I would leave the house to the office in the same car, and we would be driving back and forth at the close of the day. We were that power couple in town, but nothing lasts forever, you know. Not even a power couple. I was at the office one afternoon with some representatives from a startup firm when Tim rushed in, whispered in my ear to excuse myself and come with him now. If anyone had enough sense to not barge in the way Tim did, it was Tim, and so I knew his reasons must be quite serious. I excused myself and left the room with him, and the moment I got outside the room, I could hear some people screaming downstairs, and the drama had gotten the attention of my staff. I got there to find my wife, engaged in a fight with a lady. This was so darn embarrassing. It was a bad look for both me and my company, and everybody was watching my wife, who supposedly could not hurt a dead fly, fight like an aggressive lioness. I quickly separated the both of them and had the lady taken to an empty room where I would meet with her to find out what the issue was. The lady claimed to be Julia's friend who loaned her some money while she was still a single lady. According to her, the reason for the fight was the reluctance of my wife to pay back the money. I met with Julia, who confirmed that she owed the lady but had promised to pay when she had the money. After listening to both sides, I knew my wife was clearly in the wrong, but I did not side with her friend. I simply did what every husband who's in love with his spouse would do, cover the shame of his wife up. I asked her friend how much was it that she was owed, and she said my wife owed her the sum of $20,000. Oh boy, I was taken back by my wife's attitude, though I didn't say it. How could she owe somebody such an amount and still fight the person? So, I paid off the debt of my wife and we never talked about it, and I added on an extra $5,000 so her friend would let the whole fight thing slide. I was looking forward to returning to my life of bliss with my wife, but I soon discovered it was a mere illusion on my part. There soon arose other cases of debt, which my wife Julia had incurred while she was single. The whole thing irritated me, but Tim advised that I did everything possible to pay it off as I was doing my image and the company a favor. I tried doing as he had said, but the more I did, the more Julia's previous lifestyle of debt just resurfaced. I decided to speak to her about it to let her know that I would take out a certain amount of her salary to cover the debt which I had paid off so far. Julia, who had never questioned any of my decisions right from my dating days, asked how I expected her to pay $5,000 for the Rolex watch she just gifted me. She was indirectly saying that I was paying for the watch and the good things that she had gifted me in the past. I held myself back from any display of displeasure as I did not want to ruin my own marriage. But Julia went ahead to call me an ingrate. She immediately demanded a divorce, and I was just shocked. How could she be demanding of a divorce from a marriage that was less than 3 months old? I tried appealing to her. I even promised to repay all her debts without touching her salary. But she just walked out of the house onto the street where she was waiting for a cab, and before I could put on something nice to go after her, the taxi zoomed off. I got into my own car and went after her. The only thing in my head was to save my marriage, and my wife had just demanded a divorce, and it would be the biggest scandal of my life. Getting divorced in less than 3 months after marriage. My coordination was not at its peak, and I heard a loud bang. It was the last thing I could remember before I woke up in the hospital. It's been a month since I got admitted there, and everyone has come to visit me. Except for my wife. Though my marriage is on the verge of collapse, I'm glad Tim is looking out for the company for me. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. Wow, that was a lot to unpack in today's story. However, it is far from over. 4 updates is what I have for you guys today. If you're new to the channel and you want daily videos, Mr. Reddito drops every single day, so the best thing you can do is click that subscribe button right now underneath this video for daily videos. Here's your update. I left the hospital earlier than expected, and this is against my advice of my doctors. I could not stay back. I'd spent all my days in the hospital bed thinking about how I could rectify the issue with Julia when she sent me the divorce papers right there at the hospital. What's someone whose husband had an accident during an attempt to make peace with you? Wow, that was harsh. She never bothered checking up for once on how I was faring, and she was aware of my accident otherwise. How did she know I was bedridden at the hospital? Thank God I did not go into a coma because I was close. I was thinking about the scandal my divorce would make. The divorce papers that I was served stated that Julia was demanding half of my property. What would my friend's family and foes say? Well, I had not informed any of my family members about the situation of things yet. I still wanted to see how I could save the day. I got out of the hospital bed, but I had to enlist the services of physiotherapists who would be coming to aid my recovery phase. To be honest, I was feeling the pain on my inside way more than I felt the pain of a fractured leg. I had my driver take me straight to the office, and my workers looked after me like they were seeing a ghost. I branched off to Tim's office, but he wasn't there, and neither was my wife and hers. I decided to go wait for Tim in my office, and I was close to the door when I heard funny noises. I opened the door and I froze. Right before my eyes were my wife Julia and my best friend Tim, and they were making out. They quickly disentangled themselves from their arms and ran out of my office. The walking stick I was on no longer was strong enough to support me, and I collapsed to the ground in tears. There was no way that we could have started this escapade while I was at the hospital. This was a plan that had been going on for some time, but I can't figure out how long it's been. I spoke with my staff at the office, and they told me that my wife Tim became the power couple ever since I was at the hospital. I feel like a fool right now. My friend, whom I've confided in all of my life, was not just managing my business, he was equally managing my wife. No wonder she wants half of my property so she could spend it on him. I'm at a crossroads right now, and I just don't know what to do. What would you do if you were me? Update number 2. Neither my wife nor the lover surfaced at the company for the next 2 days. I'd gotten a little grip over myself and headed to my friend's home. I don't know what I was expecting when I was going to go there, but I just went. It was me reacting to the pain. I got to the house to find his 4-month pregnant wife, who had not seen her eyes on her husband for the past 2 days. From the way she spoke, I deduced she was still in the dark about the latest display of recklessness by her husband. She said her husband's phone number had not been going through for some days. I didn't want to tell her about it yet, but she was contemplating going to file a missing persons report, so I had to. She was shocked as I was when I caught them in the act in my office. She knew her husband's previous lifestyle of a womanizer, and though she did not argue that a leopard does not change its spots, she never expected that the leopard would turn around and bite its own friend. She was still in shock when her husband walked in. I could smell the alcohol on Tim from where I stood. His wife and I both looked at him for some form of explanation, but he was the least bothered about it. I finally asked him why he had done what he did to me, and the things which he said startled me. He began calling me an ingrate, who made him resign from his job to manage my own business, but was repaid with just a 20% share of the company. Well, I was stunned. He didn't even bother sugarcoating what he said for the sake of his wife. In the midst of Tim's ranting, he went ahead and said that it was my stinginess that was my undoing. He said I acted as if the world revolved around me, and that was why I was busy receiving gifts that he and Julia had borrowed money to buy during our courtship phase, but I refused to reciprocate the gesture. The revelations which slipped out of his mouth that day made me understand that he and Julia had set me up ever since his wedding day. He was to make us meet, get me to marry her without signing a prenup, and encourage me to clear her never-ending debts. I could have engaged in a fist fight with Tim, but I was still not strong enough. I turned and walked away after asking him to never step foot in my establishment ever again. He didn't seem too bothered, and I'm sure besides my wife he had been managing, he had equally managed some money into his pocket like a thief. The reason Julia wanted to divorce me was to go live the rest of her life with my friend Tim. I'd known Tim longer than her, and I'm certain that he would not stay with her for more than a few months. I only pity his wife. Update number 3. These past few weeks have been heavy on me, to say the least. I would need to show up to work looking like nothing was amiss, even though my workers are, well, not in the dark about the happenings around my life. I just have to put up a facade that would not make my staff feel less inspired to work. I'd go home and, well, the pain would be no less. This has been my life of lately, and Tim's wife, Maeve, paid me a visit to see how I was doing, and it meant a lot to me. Here was somebody who was more heartbroken, if not more than I, but she took out time to pity me. Maeve's attitude impressed me, and I just kept wondering why good folks never end up with people of like mind. So, I asked what her plan was, and she said that she moved out of the house and was making plans of divorcing Tim. I was tempted to ask her to come live in my apartment as it was too big for me, but it would not paint a good picture at the moment, would it? I asked her to never hesitate in seeking help from me, and the need just ever arose. My wife showed up at my house a few days later from a hotel where she had been staying, and I felt she was coming to take her things, but no. She looked apologetic, and she was, or so she claimed. She informed me that she was sorry about all that happened between us and was ready to iron things out. Well, this was just days before the divorce hearing, and she was dropping this whole thing on me. I asked what changed her mind, and she just talked nonsense about being in love with me and wanting to make our marriage work. Well, I was not going to be fooled twice. I knew there were two possible reasons why she would want to make up with me. It was either she knew that the divorce would end up with her getting nothing once I produced proof of her infidelity, or she was already having issues with her lover, Tim. It didn't matter to me, though. I was going to give her the divorce that she asked me for. I was definitely going to give it to her, all right, but it'll lack the happy ending that she desired. I had my staff throw her things out while I dragged her out of my home. I asked her to expect my divorce papers very soon, and I'm currently working with my lawyer to set up divorce proceedings. Update number 4. Whatever has a beginning has to have an end, right? And I'm glad my story with Julia is over. Yeah, I've been involved in the scandal which I was trying to avoid, but I would take any form of scandal over living with Julia. Besides, the scandal was not as bad as I thought. I used it to my advantage as I made the public see what kind of wife and friend I had all along. Julia did her best to try to convince me at making peace, but my mind was made up. During our day in court, I got some of my staff as witnesses to the fact that my wife and my best friend had been engaging in a, relationship while I laid struggling for my life at the hospital. The judge was bewildered at the level of deception which Tim had gone to just to siphon money out of me. My marriage to Julia was annulled in my favor, and the judge did not end it there. He ordered her to repay me the whole amount I'd cleared up for her debt, as she would face some jail time. If she didn't pay. After I was done with Julia, I created a case against Tim at the police station. I had him arrested for mismanagement of funds. I'd called in the service of an auditor to run an audit of my company from the time when I had my accident till when I took over the reins of the management from Tim. And the auditor's report showed that there were a lot of diverted funds. Tim was detained at the police station when his wife slammed him with the divorce papers too, and he was being hit on all sides. Tim was sentenced to 3 years in the slammer and was separated from his wife. He was forced to sell the 20% share of my company which he owned, and a huge chunk of the money was given to his wife to cover for child support fees while he was going to be behind bars. Guess who bought the shares? That's right, me. I've taken back control of my company, and I don't think there's a need for a manager right now. Maeve gave birth to a beautiful baby boy 3 months ago, and, we've become official. We've got something going on now. You could say I'm helping Tim manage his wife now. Don't blame or judge me, please. I'm only reciprocating the good gesture. I even had her and the baby move in with me. I would raise that child as though he was mine, though, and I would ensure Tim has zero presence in his life. I don't know what has become of Julia, but last I checked, she was going around looking miserable. Serves her and her lover right.
Okay, so this story has a lot to unpack. But let's just go ahead and skip to the end of the story. Am I the only one who was hoping OP and Maeve would get together? I mean, it just feels right since they both went through the same ordeal, and it turns out that's exactly what happened. Guys, I want to ask you, has anybody listening to this story ever been involved in a similar situation to this, or know somebody that has? Drop your comments down below, let's discuss it, because oh boy, this story had a lot of twists and turns. Guys, if you want more daily videos, the best way is super simple. Subscribe to the channel, smash the bell notification so you always get alerted when a new video comes out, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care, and remember, it's cool to be kind. See ya!